Thank you, everyone. So great to meet you all. My name is Marlena Flick, and I'm a policy researcher here at PERT. Thank you for joining our webinar today. Um, so we're coming to you today from Dejoke in Montreal. Our Director of Policy and Research, her name is Morgan, will join us a little bit later, hopefully, but for the good reason that she's been invited to present a lot of our research findings and policy recommendations on youth to a standing committee at the House of Commons at an overlapping time. So exciting things for our research, and we'll look forward to seeing her face in our meeting a little bit later. In the meantime, I am joined by our fantastic regional panelists who I will introduce when we get to that part for a post-presentation discussion and our Q&A with you. As many of you know, though, PERT is the Provincial Employment Roundtable. We're a nonprofit, multi-stakeholder initiative focused on addressing the employment and employability challenges facing Quebec's English-speaking community. And today we're presenting our findings from a forthcoming report on the French language needs and experiences of regional English speakers. I'm going too far ahead for everybody. Here we go. The research that we're presenting today was funded by the Secrétariat aux relations avec les Québécois d'expression anglaise, the SRQEA, and had the objective of assessing how English speakers in the regions are learning French, their experiences using the French that they know to go about daily life and get the jobs that they want, and overall what their French language learning needs are in their own words. So in partnership with the Regional Development Network, or RDN, we launched a survey in 2023 of regional adults who, between English and French, consider English to be their primary language. I'm just going to take a pause here because I see actually there's still some more people I'm letting in. Thanks. So we sampled people who consider themselves English speakers and Anglophones and ended up with a sample of over 650 regional English speakers through our networks, which is a very significant sample size to derive meaningful results in a non-randomized survey. The forthcoming report also includes contextualized findings from analysis of Census 2021 data and a supplemental survey that PERT conducted of English speakers' awareness and experiences of various French language assessments. So just to quickly situate our findings, the impetus for this research is the well-known but perhaps insufficiently executed knowledge that gaps for most socially and economically marginalized groups are more pronounced in the regions owing to regional differences of these communities, of varying unique histories of English speakers in them, as well as a larger degree of rurality and lower density populations. For those who may not be as familiar with the regions, there are 15 administrative regions outside of Montreal and Laval, which we call the regions, representing over a third or 37% of English-speaking Quebecers. English speakers in the regions have higher unemployment rates, and this results in a bit of a mixed picture of both higher poverty rates and mixed income disparities. But altogether, we see that English speakers face a bit of like a double bind. They experience the linguistic-based gaps as English speakers in Quebec overall, while regional populations as a whole tend to experience worse outcomes as compared to urban centers like Montreal and Laval. So in other words, we find that where outcomes are poorer in the regions, they're typically a little bit worse for English speakers. It's important to contextualize this with what we know about English speakers' French language levels and what those are in the regions in particular. But in absence of administrative data collected on this point, our survey found that from our sample, over 80% said that they can communicate in French to some degree, but almost exactly half find it difficult, and less than 1 in 5 do so with ease, meaning that our first big takeaway is simply that there's a widespread need for French language training across the regions overall. So we're going to get into that. Just to recap the roadmap of our findings, we're going to go through the headline findings of how English speakers learn French and what their experiences were in the regions, where that leaves them in terms of being able to use French to integrate socially and economically today, and how they feel about those experiences and what they need to learn more efficiently and effectively. So starting in schools, we found that most, over 80%, had received some kind of French language training during school, 2/3 of whom did so in Quebec. However, a significant number felt that this French language education was poor quality, especially at the primary and secondary school levels. These experiences were slightly improved at the post-secondary level, and this may be for several reasons, including things like classes being more resourced or some potential skewing on the basis of students being slightly more engaged, more older, self-selective in their language learning, in a mixed social learning environment, or having some degree of French language training already under their belt. But to not speculate, we asked respondents how they felt or why they felt what they felt, pardon me, and we found a few themes. One, that they felt that their French language education in school was simply not enough to retain learning, that they lacked opportunity to practice French outside of classes in the real world. Their unique needs were not met, such as classes or curriculum not being accessible or sensitive to disabilities or Indigenous learning experiences, for example, or that French content was not Quebec specific, things like textbooks and teachers teaching what our respondents often called France French. We also learned that many pursued further education as adults to continue or even, in their words, redo their French language learning in schools. Of these continued or adult language learning experiences, we found that 2/3 of respondents had participate in French language training as an adult, primarily from formal and traditional providers like adult education centers, post-secondary institutions, on-the-job training, and through francisation. We also find that those who have had language training typically used more than one type of provider or learning method. And these findings reflect some later findings we'll discuss around the desired variety of programming, but we also found very clearly that this may reflect challenges finding French language training that hits the right balance of being both accessible and suitable or matching to their individual learning needs. For instance, many described well-known regional and rural challenges of accessing programs that are far away or at times that are hard to make. But just as many painted a bit of a more nuanced picture that sometimes describes programs that are, accessible, that are simply not what you need at that time, such as more intermediate or advanced classes or learning that is focused on French for the workplace or the job hunt. Or as another example, several described the situation where as a beginner, it's hard to know how to even find French language classes or accesses to materials once you do, simply because all the marketing information or instructions are in French. I'm getting ahead of myself in the slides one more time, guys. I'm excited to get to our panelists. So where that leaves us in terms of life and work, most 79% of regional English speakers who we surveyed are required to use French at work at least sometimes, including many who do so regularly. And our findings suggest that respondents we sampled are using French on the job, not just because they were required to do so. Even those who described themselves as not fully comfortable in French said that they use French on the job at least sometimes. We also see that this level of French use extends to predominantly English-speaking workplaces. Over 80% use French in these jobs. The flip side of this, of course, is that big gap. The willingness to use French on the job is not necessarily translating into more opportunities, particularly in workplaces that predominantly use French. Only 39% had experience working in predominantly French-speaking environments in the last 10 years, and 1 in 5 aren't required to use any French on their job at all, so they are not currently putting their whatever proficiency they have into practice. When we ask them more specifically about their confidence doing various work and career-related tasks in French, we saw that very few felt confident in most tasks, including ones that can kind of make or break whether or not you apply to a French-speaking job, like writing a CV or networking. Our findings also suggest that regional English speakers may need support in confidence building tailored to specific career-related language tasks, like improving their, improving their general French language level and comfort. In daily life, this was a similar story and frankly a concerning one. Respondents' comfort using French drops significantly in more formal situations of everyday life, like accessing justice, healthcare, and other governmental institutions where the consequences of communication barriers or miscommunications can be both urgent and impactful. This mirrors qualitative findings we heard about their chagrin that French language education did not equip them for real-world situations, or they lacked opportunities to use and practice French outside of the classroom. We also wanted to know, I'm going to speed this up a little bit because we just want to make sure we're keeping to time, but we also wanted to know what motivated regional English speakers to learn and improve their French, and found that not only did their motivations mirror those challenges we just discussed, but by and large, they are motivated by positive and intrinsic types of motivations like belonging socially or personal interest, or not shown on the screen here. 49% said their kids and family were motivating to learn French. Another 40% related to a sense of Canadian or Quebec identity. In short, we found that they overwhelmingly resonated with wanting to learn French, and for many reasons that go beyond getting by in the province or even their careers, even though that was also a significant motivator. I'm just going to ask those in the audience, if you wouldn't mind just making sure you're muted. We'll just keep our background noise to a minimum. Thanks so much. However, and you'll have to wait till the report to see the report to go in depth on this, we found that there's still a significant number who resonated with negative motivations. For instance, over a third of respondents felt that anticipating feelings of shame, obligation, or anxiety if they did not learn French motivated their French language learning. That was 35%. And our survey's qualitative questions revealed a prevalent sense of discouragement, of anxiety, and even sometimes hopelessness around learning French and fulfilling these motivations, like getting French-speaking jobs, establishing community, or continually improving their skills while balancing the demands of adult lives. The number of older respondents, for example, who simply felt that it was too late for them to learn and there were no resources for them to do so anyways, as expressed by them, were significant, and they expressed a sense of feeling left out and sidelined, while working age respondents communicated sentiments that were like a precursor to those situations, like feeling exasperated, trying to improve their learning and seeking resources over their lifetime. We asked respondents what they felt they needed from French language training. This included a support in various areas, as well as levels of French language proficiency and the types of program structures and delivery methods that they felt were most suitable. You can see the full package of those findings in the report, but for now, you can see on the screen that some of their top desires were, and we'll notice a few consistencies from earlier. One, the emphasis on job and career-related programming. Two, that almost 2/3 simply wanted confidence-boosting programs. Also, that programs that supported their cultural and social integration and acumen were popular. And finally, that at least half emphasized wanting French language programming beyond beginner level, something that respondents expressed throughout the survey. When it came to program delivery, the top theme of qualitative responses was a desire for flexibility and choice to suit their individual needs and at different times, their individual needs changing over different times. They were also very interested in programs that were outside of the classroom, integrated in life, in culture, or the workday, like mentorship programs, on the job training, or immersive programs. And I think by and large, something just to say there about the flexibility is that look different to everybody at different points. So where do we go from here? On the basis of these findings, our report outlines 4 priorities for improving French language training in the regions, in addition to more concrete recommendations that you can read there. In our view, those top 4 priorities are in no particular order. 1, ensuring quality French language education in school, since this sets the tone for future learning and motivations, supports school and work transitions, and may be the only language learning that some people do receive. 2 is to leverage positive and intrinsic motivations to learn. There's a lot of research that learning is more sustainable when learners are self-driven and feel the rewards and purpose of that learning. But also this assumption and this approach recognizes and respects that most English speakers are in fact self-motivated and positively and want to learn and use French, which is an important positive social learning environment and validates a sense of belonging in the province. 3rd, pragmatic program for everyday life and work, since we found that regional English speakers both need and want to pursue practical French language learning. And lastly, a priority to enhance the accessibility of existing programs while striving for programmatic diversity, which is a tough balance to strike sometimes. But since English speakers have a diversity of needs, as do the regions, and we saw a range of what they meant by wanting variety and suitable programming. And also because of how frequently it was expressed that what is accessible isn't always suitable and vice versa. To course correct the piecemeal system that respondents described, we see a vision perhaps where a coherent modular system of French language training could be developed if the quality of existing and accessibility of existing suitable programs is upheld. And so it takes identifying what those are, while new ones are developed. This probably involves positive duplication and would require diversity of regional stakeholders with sustained resources across the table, including educational institutions and employers. Those, my folks, are our key findings and headlines from our report. And I'm just going to take a second to pull down our slides from the screen so you can see our panelists. And we're going to jump into a panel discussion with everybody. Just give me one quick second here. Just got one more panelist I would like to spotlight with us. Awesome. There's Lily. Hi, Lily. Great. One more moment of patience for me, everyone, so I can see the chat for any questions you put in. Okay. Meet our panelists, everybody. Today we're joined by Liliana Gebrergawi from the Morrissey region and Angelica Yefimova from Capitale Nationale, who will speak to their personal experiences as English speakers and French language learners in the regions. Lily also works at one of our regional or partner organizations, CASE. And next we have 2 representatives from organizations that support English speakers in the regions. Shelley Fiquet, Director of Regional Capacity Building at the Coasters Association, and Marilou Trahan Thomason, Development Officer in the Continuing Education Department at the New Frontiers School Board. Welcome, everybody. I'm going to start by maybe having us paint a picture together from our personal and professional experiences. And while we're in this discussion, I just want to remind the audience that you are part of this conversation. And so we'll be taking your questions at the end of our pre-planned questions. So feel free to use the chat to start populating and get that lineup going of what you are curious to know more about, what you'd like clarification on, what interests you as you hear our different experiences and reflections on the topic. So I'm going to start with you, Angelica and Lily, if you don't mind. Reflecting on your experiences, can you give us a sense of what your French language learning journey has been? Maybe we'll start with you, Angelica.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for this question. Honestly, it's really important to reflect on it. Honestly, it was and it still is a tough journey because when I came in Canada, it was 3 years ago. I didn't speak French at all. And I combined lots of resources. Usually it was private courses, private tutoring, online tutoring. I tried francisation as well, but it was a short period of time. I focused more on private programs because I started working and I could not mix both work and francisation. It was hard for me. And over 8 months, approximately, I'm focusing on discipline and consistency because I used to stop and then restart learning French because it's difficult. Now I'm focusing on consistency, and now I can describe my French as an upper-immediate level. Probably I'm preparing for the test to pass. So yes, it's like this.
Thanks, Angelica. I'm not sure if you can see some clapping hand emojis for you
I don't know.
celebrating your persistency and your progress to your own goals there. Lily, wondering if you might also share a bit about your learning journey as well, please.
For sure. I moved from a different province. I'm not new to Canada, but when I came over 3 years ago in Quebec, I started the French learning from zero, no background, nothing. And I started full time in like the local language center. And yeah, till recent, I'm going like full time and part time. It is going well in like understanding the basic or the foundation and even formulating the sentence because I didn't have any background, so I needed that. But for when it comes to integrating and using the language that I have learned from school and applying it, that is the journey I was struggling. And when the Circumplex mentorship program came, it was an idea where like it will mentor specific targeting people in specific industry terms to help me what I needed on my day-to-day uh, routine that was very like it was an added bonus uh, on top of the foundation that I have got from school. So I'm very happy. I am still intermediate level when it comes to French, but at the same time, I'm still going to the journey and I'm enjoying it.
Thanks very much, Lily. And just for context for the audience, the program that Lily mentioned is PERT's Circumflex Mentorship Program, which you're welcome to check out. Maybe I'll put a link in there after, which matches English speakers and French speakers in the same regions or industry for career-related mentoring, but while they can practice their French. And thanks, Chad, for putting that link in there. Shelley and Mary Lou, I know you've seen, I heard, I think, similar stories to Angelica and Lily's. So I'd love if you could maybe share what some common French language learning journeys are that you've seen, including any common pitfalls or pivotal points that you see, yeah, English speakers go through in your region specifically. And maybe we'll start with you, Shelley.
Yeah, sure. I think on the lower North Shore where I live, geography plays a big part of in the French language learning. We have 16 small communities. We have two indigenous, two francophone, one bilingual, but we have 11 that are unilingually anglophone communities. And a lot of our majority of our communities are not connected by road. So traveling to francophone communities is not it's not easy. And in an English speaking community, with the few hours that you hear in school, outside of that, you hear no French. So developing conversational skills in French is extremely difficult. And then a lot of our youth, to continue post-secondary, we have to leave the region. The majority of the population choose to pursue their post-secondary in English provinces because their French is not up to par to continue in post-secondary in Quebec. So that's a huge concern for our region. Um, and also to access our health services in French, we have to leave the area to travel to appointments to Sept-Îles, Quebec City, and that is extremely difficult for someone who doesn't hear any French. So getting the proper information, communicating properly is extremely stressful, is extremely difficult for our population. We do have adult education that does offer some French courses. Myself, I've taken three adult ed courses, but it's very difficult to practice that outside of the few hours you're in class. So
Right.
maintaining any French information you have and also practicing is extremely difficult in our region.
Mm. Thanks, Shelley. Brings a lot to mind. Mary Lou, I wonder if you could share a bit of the same of what you've seen.
Yeah, sure. So, I'm more on the south shore of Montreal, so in the Montérégie region. Um, so we do offer programs like Francisation, like the one Angelica took. A lot of people like it, but with the budget cuts, we cannot maintain the offer of service all the time. So it becomes an issue at one point where students start the program and then they're unable to finish
Mhm.
um, their levels, and also some of them need to go back to work or the schedule just doesn't fit their needs or family obligations. So there's, you know, advantages and disadvantages to that program. Also, I've seen a lot of students like Lily who come from different countries or from different provinces where the French is not necessarily taught the same way or not taught at all. So we have a lot of students coming in, and uh, we need to, in the adult ed sector, we need to take them in as secondary one or grade seven French level student, but in fact they're at base level. So it becomes very challenging to bring those students up, and it's not because they cannot, it's just because they don't have the background that our students from Quebec have access to. So yeah, that's another struggle that we face.
Thanks, Mary Lou. The metaphor of language learning that's coming to mind as you're describing those types of journeys is when you hear people describe language learning kind of like learning to drive a car. And the story you're telling, Mary Lou, I'm imagining like how hard it is to learn to actually learn confidence and to feel like a confident driver if you're stuck in the learner period where you're just doing book learning and only under supervised specific hours, then you don't get practice time outside that. And then if you stagnate at that and you never get to keep trying on the road and on the highways and whatnot and getting that practice and moving beyond that beginner level, it's easy to stay stuck and then lose those skills. Um, so that's a challenging picture that you're each sharing. As we move into some questions, I think about a couple of you have mentioned the challenges that this makes for employment and school to work transitions or balancing francisation. I think Angelica, you mentioned balancing francisation while working. We're going to move into some questions about that. And while we do, from the audience, I'd love if, even if you don't have questions, if you want to maybe start sharing some stories of things that I think you resonate with or points of that, we'd love to hear that too, to reflect on. So just coming to the subject of employment as it relates to French language learning in the regions. Maybe we'll start with you, Angelica, and then Lily. Maybe we'll just kind of keep going in this order. Our survey touched on a lot of different reasons why English speakers might struggle to get jobs in French-speaking workplaces, even when they feel comfortable in French. Based on your experiences, what would you think make it easier for English speakers to access jobs in the regions, or maybe just your region, while still improving their French? What could help you kind of get through that balancing difficulty? You have any thoughts about that?
I can answer this question.
We'll
No.
take it. Thanks.
I think we need more opportunities to have some speaking clubs for Anglophones because I'm struggling exactly with this issue. I can know the grammar, I can understand what people are talking near me, I can understand, but I cannot express my thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a barrier for me. I could not talk. I could understand, but I could not talk. Even um, I created different emails, and at the same time, when the client could call me, I was like, yes, but I do not talk French. I can understand you, but I cannot talk French. So, and we mentioned one program, Circular Flags mentorship program. I'm using it currently. I have a mentor. We talk. Beyond that, I add some courses to speak because that's the main point. When we have the interview, we have to speak, and usually it's so difficult.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Angelica. Maybe before we go to move to you, Lily, Angelica, I'm wondering if you mentioned earlier, you noted how it was hard to balance the francisation, taking francisation, or ta which some government-sponsored French language training for those who may not be familiar, and then also work at the same time and do these other things. Could you maybe describe a little bit, like before you decided, okay, I can only do one of these two things right now? What did that look for you trying to balance it? What were those hours like? How were you trying to muddle through that until you made that decision?
When I came in Canada, I immediately registered myself. Je me suis inscrite. I don't remember how to talk in English for this program, and I started learning French. It was a full-time francisation, and then I found a job. So for me, it was a question of the immigration. I can start working and I can start doing my documents, or I will continue learning French, but I will need to find another job, for example, in the evening, because the pay was not enough. Of course, it helped, but it was not enough because it's life. So I decided to work and then to pay for the courses.
Thanks, Angelica. Something that you'll see everyone in the report in just a kind of our contextual findings from the census is income levels in a lot of the regions are like median incomes are lower and jobs are paying less and it's harder to get jobs. And so you can imagine the struggle of like trying to hold on to something that feels extra precious for one, but also that the money doesn't go as far as it might in Montreal and Laval, in kind of balancing making that balance for you. Lily, do you mind sharing a bit about what you think could help make that balance, or what your experience in that regard was?
Yeah, it is very important. I believe Shelley mentioned it regionally where we are located. For me, in the Mauricie, French is like it is. You have to have French to be able communicate with basically the larger population. So for that, I have to start like the French. Like basically, everyone has to somehow start. But at the end of the day, I would say as well acceptance. Even if you try, people accept you in a way like understand you. But sometimes the rhythm is the problem
Mm,
because like once people understand you, okay, like now you know, and then like they go full rhythm, like and you are like stuck. And I'm like, oh, okay, where like what is the best, like what is the next phase so that I can catch up? So
mm,
that is where I am struggling.
mm,
And but with time, I hope just to resolve that.
mhm. Thanks very much, Lily. And again, Shelley and Mary Lou, I know you've heard things like this before. So I'm wondering if you can kind of tell us from your experience about this catch-22, a bit of needing French to get a job, but also needing a job while you're learning, or an income, I should say, while learning French. From your view, how do you think adult French language training or continued French language training, the system around it could be improved to help English speakers balance both in your region? Shelley, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. Um, our region is a little different because um, we have a lack of employment opportunities in general, not just in French or English. Um, and again, our income levels are lower, but being isolated remote regions, the cost of living, cost of travel, it's higher. And unfortunately, the general income doesn't really reflect those realities. But if someone would like to do, someone want to pursue employment opportunities, say with our local CIS or our school board, where having French would definitely increase their opportunity to be employed by those organizations. I think for our region, it's having French second language programs that are more fluid in their way of learning. Like you can do some online or like and kind of like uh, learn at your own pace and at your own time because like many of the others, everybody is working and balancing families, and sometimes they have multiple jobs. So being able to having to participate in French second language learning at a specific time every day may be more difficult. But something having language opportunities that are more fluid and more personal base, I think would be a good option for our region. Um, I don't think our population is against learning. I think it's when you're with the education system and where the French is so low and you don't hear any of it, I just think our population is not prepared. So if our youth were, say, at elementary level where it was more focused on French, they feel more comfortable going into high school, they feel more confident speaking French coming out, then they may feel more confident applying for French employment opportunities.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that really echoes what we found in our survey is just that the French language, the build of French language proficiency, confidence, and use of it is cumulative for better or for worse. Mary Lou?
Yeah, so my thoughts go along with what Shelley just mentioned. I think it's nice to have a variety of offer of service available to the population. Um, so online, in person, during the day, in the evening, maybe some check-in type of service, like, hey, I've been practicing this at home. I want to practice it with someone. So a way to collaborate with people who are in the same situation, because I get the feeling that people trying to learn French feel isolated often, and feel like they're the only ones struggling with the language when learning it, but it's not true. French is so difficult, and I feel like we need more community, more collaboration of people trying to learn the language and trying to dismantle this idea that everyone's fine with it and they're learning it quickly. And no, everyone is struggling, and that's why they're learning the language. Otherwise, they wouldn't want to practice it. So I think working together, having a variety of service, also working with the workforce. I think having French in the workplace is ideal for people to learn the terminology that they need to do their job. So learning French specific for your work or for um, items like going to the hospital, your health, being able to communicate in themed areas that you need to express your feelings, your emotions, your thoughts, which is often not what is being taught. You know, we learn the basics, we learn the verbs, we learn how to write, but maybe that's not the way we need to go. Maybe we need to be themed based. So, yeah.
Thanks, Mary Lou. I'm really excited for you to all read our report because I think you'll see in writing a lot of what our panelists have been describing as well. Um, we're going to move along to maybe some kind of forward thinking solutions, things that are working, that kind of thing. And before we take some time for Q&A from the audience or comments, again, we'd love your participation in the chat if you are able. For those who are there, I see lots of heads nodding, so we'd love to kind of capture why you're nodding your head. So feel free to, yeah, put those questions in there early, or even just say what region you're coming from. That helps us get a sense of how these findings are relating to you today. So finally, we want to talk, we don't want to let everyone go without yeah, hearing what you think could be done to improve these situations. I think, Mary Lou, we're jumping off exactly what you just started describing. And maybe we'll start with you, Lily, this time. Thinking back to the 4 priority areas that we outlined in our report, we're improving French language training in Quebec's regions. I'd love if you could share if one of those resonated with you most and why, maybe.
Can you please ask the question
Yeah, sure.
again?
We'd love to know which one of our 4 priority areas resonated with you as a French language learner or as a member of CASE, and why that resonated with you, why you felt maybe that kind of bucket of recommendations is a good one. And I can read, maybe I'll recap them for everybody actually. Quickly, the 4 priorities that we recommend in our report, which you may or may not agree with, are ensuring quality French language education in schools, leveraging positive intrinsic motivations to learn, pragmatic programming for everyday life, and enhancing accessibility while striving for programmatic diversity. I can also
I
give you
apologize. I think I'm having some issues that your
ah,
voice is just repeating on my phone.
no problem. So I think maybe Lily's going to just rejoin us then. Maybe Angelica, you have thoughts of your own to share on that.
Yes, sure. I'm curious about pragmatic programming for everyday life and work. It reminds me of Francisation because it's divided into 2 parts, like general French and French for work, for different areas. Why I'm curious about this because I learn French not just to know French. I am learning French because I want to be a student, I want to study. I want to change my career, I want to work, and I want to have really good conditions at work with a fair pay. So that's why I'm learning French. And based on the different conversations with various immigrants, I understood that they learn French for working. They want to work, and for the immigration, some of them, yes.
Angelica. I'm just going to take one quick second to let Lily back in here. See that she's just rejoined. There we go. Welcome back, Lily. How's your audio doing, Lily? Sounds good. Oh, all right, we'll keep troubleshooting that. Maybe in the meantime, we'll turn to Shelley and Mary Lou, and maybe we'll start with you this time, Mary Lou. I'm wondering what you think. The purpose of doing all this research is to help us develop more timely and responsive policy and programming systems for French language learning in the regions. What do you think that policymakers, or those responsible for program development, should keep in mind when making decisions about French language education and training to ensure that it is appropriate for the diversity of Quebec's regions, or maybe your own region if you prefer to answer that way?
Sure. Well, I think they need to first consider that all regions are quite different. Shelley and I's region are very different. We do not have the same needs. We do not have the same people, so we don't need the same resources. We need to adapt to the social economic status of our people. We need to adapt to the different cultures that might be in our communities. And so we need to also understand the student's background and adapt to it. So I have students that come from different countries that have a hard time, that struggle with writing in their own language. So you would teach that student French in a very different way than you would a student that comes from Ontario that has a PhD, you know? So I think we really need to understand that French cannot be uniform and cannot be taught the same way to everybody, and that we don't all have the same tools to teach it. So it needs to be a flexible program, and I think there needs to be more awareness uh, about that.
Thanks very much, Mary Lou. Shelley, do you have thoughts on that? I would
I
love to hear.
absolutely agree what Mary Lou just spoke about.
Mhm.
Learning French here on the Lower North Shore is much different than learning French in Montreal as an English speaker in Montreal or Quebec City, where you hear French outside of the education system. Here we don't have that. So I think that policymakers should really look at regional realities in terms of when they develop programs. We cannot have a cookie cutter approach. We've had this for years with government, and it doesn't work. And I think maybe an emphasis on conversational French as opposed to like really structured. It's a part of building confidence. If you're confident to speak French, whether you're correct or not, you will learn as the more you speak. But if someone who does not have any confidence speaking French, whether they understand the structure of a sentence or not, it doesn't make a difference.
Thanks, Shelley. And again, I don't know if you guys can see the emojis coming up on screen, but your comment on that confidence, that the value of building confidence garnered several positive uh, reactions and agreement. Certainly, our report found that as well. Lily, thanks very much for your figuring all the tech things. Wondering, and just want to make sure you have a chance to share anything you want to around what you think could be done to better improve French language learning in the regions before we move to our Q&A.
Is that question for me now?
It
It's
is.
very fast.
It's for you, Lily.
Okay. Okay. I think motivation to learn is very, very important because sometimes what I have noticed is that people start the French language and because of like so many other education or responsibilities, then that motivation just disappears. And to keep that and finding different program platforms that will help those people to continue because as we have identified already, they're like being able to speak French is very mandatory. So just keeping that motivation is the most important thing.
Thanks, Lily. If anyone had trouble with just hearing that full comment with that full reflection with the audio, Lily was speaking to the necessity for programming to be flexible to people's various kind of other responsibilities and to have a very realistic approach, it sounded like, to yeah, all the different things you have going on, childcare and school and jobs and thinking of Shelley, your earlier comments, getting across the region for your groceries and the time that that takes and things like this. We have some time saved for our Q&A. I welcome everyone to ask questions of our panelists or of myself if you have questions about the research. So we're going to turn to our questions from the audience. You can either put them in the chat or if you raise their hand, I can see you and give you the second to unmute and voice it. I see a question from Marc Albert, so maybe we'll take your question there.
Bonjour, I wrote it down already, mais moi je travaille plus dans le secteur jeune, and there's always a struggle in the youth sector when, whether you're in Harrington Harbor or you're in Kirkland, when your whole environment and your whole world speaks English, and then you have French classes. Sometimes people are keen on learning it, and sometimes they'll do it, but they're like, okay, gotta do it, gotta do it. But it's not, it doesn't feel meaningful to some students. And then they get a job. And then they're part of a team when they have to speak French with other people, and then it's some kind of a shock. And an ongoing struggle we have in the youth sector is how can we make this relevant when the student actually at this point in his life doesn't need French? Because the parents speak English and the daycare is in English and the whichever youth activity is in English. So at that point, French doesn't feel relevant to them unless the parents like really go out of their way to say, "Oh, wow, oh my God, that's a French-speaking person." How is that? So I'm always, and it's been a burning question in my mind since for as far as I've been in education. How can we make French relevant to the youth when it's not an easy feast to do?
Thanks. Big and great question. Thank you very much for it, Marc-Albert. I'm going to open to our panelists if people have reactions they want to give first. Anybody, Mary Lou?
Sure. Yes. So I think it's a very good question. It's also a very big struggle. I think if we go back to the understanding that we need to teach French in a different way, I think we can maybe gain a bit of student motivation there. So maybe if we focus more on conversation, more on practical knowledge of the French language rather than starting with the basics of the French writing, which is very complicated, which is very difficult. I think maybe we can get more motivation from the students and also explaining the why. Why are you learning French? Why will it be important for you? And why should you start learning it now? I think maybe we could grab a bit of attention there.
Thanks, Mary Lou. Shelley, you have a response as well for that.
Yeah, I absolutely have the same concern, and we do have the same concern here. Like you said, Makaba, sometimes you don't need it. And if they come out of school and they go to another province to work, they don't need French. I think starting young and kind of making it as a like expressing the benefits of it instead of making it a chore and a class, and the younger that kids see the value in being bilingual and learning a second language, I think that'll impact them more as they get older.
Thanks, Shelley. Just going to take a second to plug our forthcoming youth report as well from PERT in the coming season. So we'll make sure that's in your inboxes too. Angelica and Lily, do you have any reactions to that question? Or I'm going to take another one as well if you don't. Angelica.
If we're talking about students like at schools, I think it's better to communicate with parents because students, in this case, cannot understand the consequences of their decisions. So it's better to communicate with parents and explain what it means. If we're talking about students like universities, I think it's their choice. I think we cannot change their motivation. They have to understand that it's impossible to live without French here. At least in Quebec City. I'm talking about my experience in Quebec City because I talked to different people and I understood that everyone struggles with French, but still that they're trying to learn it.
Thanks, Angelica. I'm hearing from everyone so far. Just something, in the report we heard a lot about motivations and desire to learn French to integrate socially and to prepare them to participate with French speakers. And frankly, that looks very different for youth, a social environment than when you're an adult. Lily, do you have reactions to that question about youth and students as well?
For me, for the majority, it is I see students as adults or someone who's learning second language or third language, but not for youth, because the youth here they already get the English school, they offer the French, and the French school, of course, the French is already installed on the curriculum. But as an adult learning, sometimes it is very difficult So understanding the challenges or the working progress that everyone has, it is like it is understanding the factors is important to help us integrate more and learn more languages.
Thank you, Lily. And thanks again, Marc Albert, pardon me, for the question. I see a hand from Morgan. Morgan, we have do I have to unmute you or?
No, I don't think so. I'm here. Hello. I also wanted to take a stab at answering this question. Marc Albert and I have met in the context of pilot programming to help support, I guess, francisation of youth and widening kind of French language pathways into employment for English speaking youth, and particularly those who are in kind of this bubble that we've described that might not have a lot of access to or in a strong environment of French language learning. And I think, I think you touched on this lately in the presentation as well. What we hear in the research is that youth or people reflecting on their education journeys, so no longer youth, are highlighting that the immersive experiences that they get outside of the classroom are what function as a make or break for their learning journey, such that they are feeling more prepared to engage in French if they've had more of those opportunities to practice and speak outside of the classroom, even if they've had really good classroom experience as well. I'm thinking of your example of the driving test as well. You just you just got to hit the road sometimes. And so I think we're also thinking about programming that complements and fits into schooling, but is extracurricular or something like that in nature that brings youth along into it. And I think that there are a lot of different examples of what that can look like. But one thing that actually Angelica said that I think is a really interesting parallel is a lot of early childhood literacy programs will focus on the family and fostering an environment of literacy within the family such that the youth are being raised in the family with that kind of value and exposure. And I think the family is an interesting place to start as well for French language learning, especially when we're talking about bubbles. What does it look like? And we see this in this report as well, that often parents are excited to learn French because they want to be able to set their kids up for success in Quebec. So also thinking about, I guess, intergenerational solutions.
Thanks very much, Morgan. That's really cool to hear. I think that reminder that when we're talking about social environments and the French language learning systems, the dispersion of communities, the familial and neighborhood communities are the actually what we're talking about, especially during those early years. Just for anyone who might be newer to PERT, Morgan is our Director of Policy and Research.
Apologies, I did forget to introduce myself. Thank you.
And I just want to thank everyone for the comments I see that came through in the chat as well. I see that there's been a bit of back and forth reaction around them as well.